Have you ever sat at your kitchen table, staring into your coffee, wondering, when did I become invisible in my own family? Not angry, not bitter, just tired. Tired of always being the one who gives. Tired of being told you'll get your chance later while someone else takes your moment. Tired of watching others be cherished while you keep going. Quietly. You're not alone. Sometimes family, the people we trust the most, can be the very ones who make us feel the smallest. And when you're older, you start to see how much that pain lingers. It shows up in the quiet moments, in the missed birthdays, in the way your name gets left out of conversations that matter. Today I want to tell you about two young women, two girls from very different homes, who shared the same quiet ache. One had her dreams stolen, right from her hands. The other learned that sometimes the people you trust the most can cross the line when you least expect it. Their stories aren't loud, they're not packed with drama or fancy twists, but they're true. And they carry something I think you'll feel deep in your chest. That moment when you decide, enough is enough. So sit back, take a breath. Let me walk you through these lives, because in the end, this isn't just about them. It's about anyone who's ever been pushed aside, anyone who's ever been told to be quiet, to wait, to give up. It's about you, too, and the freedom that comes when you finally say, I deserve more. I still remember the envelope, thick, ivory white paper. My name written in my grandfather's handwriting, shaky but full of love. When I opened it, my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. Inside were 2 plane tickets to Rome and a check big, enough to cover my entire trip. My hands trembled. I looked up, and there they were, Grandma and Grandpa, smiling like they had just handed me the moon. Rome, the city I had dreamed of since I was a child, where cobblestones whispered ancient stories, and every corner carried echoes of emperors and poets. I used to sneak books under the covers, reading about the Colosseum, the Pantheon, the history that breathed through the streets. And now, for my 19th birthday, it was real. It was mine. But dreams in some families don't belong to the quiet child. And I was always the quiet one. It didn't take long. That same evening, my parents sat me down with the kind of serious tone that made my stomach tighten. We think, my father said, that Amelia should take the trip. I blinked. Thought I'd heard wrong. What? My mother chimed in, soft but firm. She's studying architecture. Rome would be such an incredible opportunity for her career. Imagine all those historical buildings, the field exposure. This could help her future. I sat there holding that envelope like it might vanish. But it's my birthday. It was meant for me. They smiled like that didn't matter. She'll get more out of it, Dad said. You'll have other chances, Anna. I wish I could say I fought harder, that I stood up and screamed, no, this is mine. But I was 19, tired of always being second, and honestly, used to it. Because Amelia, my older sister, was always the golden one. 4 years older, charming, ambitious. When she walked into a room, the world adjusted itself. She had already been offered this same Rome trip on her 18th, but she chose the money instead. Now, apparently, she deserved it again. And I was just convenient, the one who could be asked to step aside. I pushed back, of course. I told them the airline didn't allow transfers. I showed them policies, but they just waved me off. We'll figure it out, they said. They always do, when it's for her. After days of pleading, crying, and being told I was making things. Difficult, I broke. I handed them the tickets. I kept the check. They said that was fair. But I didn't feel peace. I felt like a chair being pushed into the corner of the room, out of the way, out of sight. And then came the crash. Amelia was on her way to the airport when we got the call. She'd been in a taxi, got impatient, decided the driver was going the wrong way, and grabbed the steering wheel. The car crashed. She came out with scratches. The driver? A broken arm and a deep gash across his face. He pressed charges. Suddenly my parents were panicking. Their golden girl was tangled in legal mess. They'd need to use their savings to settle it quietly. And me? I said what I'd been swallowing for years. This is karma. Of course they were horrified. How could you say that? Your sister could have died. But I was done. I was done pretending this was okay. I was done carrying their disappointment. Like a coat I didn't choose to wear, I went to the hospital, not to see her, but to take back what was mine. The ticket was still in her purse. I reached in, grabbed it, and ran. No goodbyes, no apologies. Just me and a cab ride to the airport, with my heart pounding like it was trying to break free from my chest. And you, know what? I made it. I got on that plane, window seat, 22A. I didn't look back. Rome, oh Rome. It wasn't just beautiful, it was healing. I walked through ruins older than the country I was born in, ate a gelato by fountains older than my family, tree. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't Anna, the forgotten daughter. I was just Anna. I didn't check my phone until I landed. Hundreds of messages. You stole the trip. You're heartless. You ruined your sister's life. All I could do was laugh, bitterly, softly, because if anyone had ruined anything, it wasn't me. She grabbed that wheel, they pushed me aside. And I finally chose me. A few days later, I called my grandparents. I told them everything, every silent ache, every overlooked birthday, every tear that came with being second best. And they cried too. Anna, my grandmother said, voice shaking, you did the right thing. You deserve to be happy. When I came back from Rome, they had already packed up my things from my parents' house. The guest room was ready, with fresh sheets and a vase of daisies, my favorite. And for the first time, I wasn't just staying somewhere, I was home. Sometimes the danger doesn't come with a loud voice or a raised hand. Sometimes it comes wrapped in a smile, a warm cup of coffee, a ride to work. It comes slowly, quietly, until one day you look around and realize you're no longer safe. In your own home. That's how it started with Jake. I was 17 when my parents kicked me out, said if I wasn't going to help pay rent, I had no place there. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I packed my bags and called the one person I trusted most in this world, my sister Jess. Jess was my rock. 8 years older, she had raised me more than our parents ever did. She took care of my homework, held me during breakups, covered me with a blanket when I fell asleep studying. So when she opened the door to her home and hugged me tight, I thought I was safe again. She lived with her husband, Jake. They'd been together for years. He was charming, polite, always, helpful. When I was little, I used to call him my big brother, even before they were married. He worked from home, drove me to school, picked me up from my job at the ranch, brought me coffee. I thought, wow, I'm lucky to have landed here. But then, something started to shift. At first, it was subtle. He'd ask if I had a boyfriend, tease me about keeping secrets, wink and say things like, a pretty girl like you? You must be hiding something. I laughed it off, thought it was just brotherly teasing. But it kept happening. Then he started showing up every time I went to the pool. If I was sunbathing, he'd suddenly decide it was the perfect time to mow the lawn. If I swam, he'd join me. Not with casual interest, but with an intensity I couldn't explain. And when I'd get out of the shower wrapped in a towel, he'd be waiting by the hallway, just standing there. Good night, he'd say. I told myself I was overthinking it, that he was just being protective. But then came Alex. Alex worked at the same ranch I did. He was kind, gentle, the kind of boy who'd bring you water before you even asked. We talked, we laughed, and one afternoon, He asked me out. I said yes. I was nervous and excited, and on the ride home I told Jake about it. He went silent. Not the I'm processing kind of silence, but the cold, stony kind. He started grilling me. How long have you been talking to this guy? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Are you sneaking around? Then came the question that stopped me cold. What about us? Us? What us? That night I couldn't sleep. My chest was tight. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried to brush it off to tell myself he was just being protective again. But the way he looked at me wasn't brotherly. It wasn't even angry. It was possessive. So I grabbed my hoodie, slipped out, and walked to a small spot near the ranch, my usual place, to clear my head and smoke. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Where are you? Then another message, and another, and then calls, dozens, voicemails, screaming. I didn't answer, not until I saw my sister's number light up on the screen. But it wasn't Jess. It was Jake, yelling, cursing, calling me names I can't repeat. Said I was a liar. Said I betrayed him. Said I'd pay for this. I was frozen. But then I remembered Alex. I called him, barely able to speak. He picked me up, brought me to his family's ranch, and sat with me while I cried like a child. That night, I didn't go back. The next day, Jess called. Her voice was trembling. She told me that after Jake screamed into the phone, he grabbed her cell and stormed out. He'd been looking for me. In the middle of the night, she said she'd never seen him that angry. He punched the wall, threw furniture. Screamed at her for questioning him. That's when she knew, all this time. It hadn't just been in my head. We met the next day, at a small diner. Just the two of us. We sat in a booth by the window, sunlight warming the table, and we cried. Jess apologized over and over for not seeing it, for bringing him into my life, for not protecting me. I showed her the messages, the calls, and then I showed her the Reddit post I had written, asking strangers if I was imagining things. She read every word in silence, and when she finished, she looked at me and said, "We're leaving." Jess moved back in with our parents, who suddenly wanted to be grandparents again. We went back to the house with Alex and our father, packed up every last thing. Jake tried to apologize. He said he was worried, said he was stressed, said it was all a misunderstanding, but Jess had already filed for divorce. And I was free. Now I live at the ranch, in a little guest room that smells like hay and wildflowers. I work with the horses. I sleep peacefully. I laugh more than I ever have. And Alex, he's still here, still kind, still steady. We've got a date next week. Nothing fancy, just us, a blanket, and the stars. But after everything I've lived through, that's more than enough. 2 girls. One had her dreams stolen by the people who should have protected it. The other was nearly trapped by someone hiding behind a smile. Both of them were told to stay quiet, to be grateful, to not make a fuss. But they didn't. They chose themselves. Not in anger. Not in revenge, but in the most honest, powerful way a person can, by saying, "This is not love, and I deserve better." If you're watching this and a part of you is aching, quietly, silently, just know, you're not too old to choose. Peace. You're not too late to say enough, because love isn't supposed to make you feel small. Family isn't supposed to silence you, and home. Home should be the place where you are safe, not just present. Maybe you've spent decades putting everyone else first. Maybe you've smiled through pain, buried disappointment, and told yourself, that's just how life is. But life can be different, and sometimes all it takes is hearing someone else's story to finally believe your own deserves a better ending too. Thank you for listening. If these stories touched something deep inside you, if they reminded you of your own journey, your sacrifices, or even your silence, please stay with us. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on that little bell icon Because we're going to keep telling stories like these, stories that matter, stories that heal. And who knows, maybe the next one will be yours.